Thank you very much. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the program. It's no secret that our community is in pain. We've had so much bloodshed, it's almost nearly impossible to wrap our hearts and minds around all the tragedies.
Whether it's black-on-black violence, targeted killings of police, or questionable police shootings of persons of color, we certainly have had and seen enough.
Topping that, a fresh new report out from the Department of Justice. This one detailing a pattern of wrongdoing on the part of the Baltimore City Police Department. The scathing DOJ report says police in Baltimore routinely violated the constitutional rights of residents, mainly low-income black residents, by conducting unlawful stops and using, of course, excessive force. This report is not the first of its kind, taking America's police departments to task. And unfortunately, we know it won't be the last.
And coupled with alleged police wrongdoings, we've seen an uptick in crimes targeting our men and women in blue. But how do we get to a better place? For the next 90 minutes, we're going to answer that question and many more. We'll talk with a cross-section of people who work individually and collectively to make our communities better places to live, to work, to play, and to visit. But we can't have this dialogue without you. We also want your input. You can join this conversation by calling 202-432-9487. That's 202-432-9487. Or hit us on Twitter at WHUR-FM using the hashtag WHUR-Better.
All right, so everybody tune in and turn up right now. Let's get into the conversation and let's make it better. Now, just this past Tuesday marked the second anniversary of the death of Michael Brown in Ferguson, Missouri. We all know his death touched off days of protest and unrest and helped to launch the Black Lives Matter movement to a national platform.
As our next guest has seen this issue from both sides while walking the streets of our nation's capital as a police officer for over 2 decades. He's now on the other side of the badge, and he has been very critical of his fellow officers. I want everybody to welcome to our town hall Ron Hampton. He's a retired D.C. police officer and chair of the Police Reform and Accountability Task Force. Hi, Ron.
Ron, how you doing?
Ron?
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining us again, man.
Yeah,
Go right
I
ahead,
mean,
Ron.
Ron, you've been a guest with us before talking about these cases, and we've seen so many cases of alleged police wrongdoing, and far too often those cases do not result at all in any convictions.
Right.
How do we get to the point where police are being held accountable for their actions?
Well, I think they've provided plenty of evidence for us, as well as identifying what the problem is that we need to address. For example, in the recent Justice Department's report that they just released on Baltimore, there's a report that they released on Ferguson. There's a report that has been released on every city that the Special Litigation Division of the Justice Department has conducted in police department. In those reports, it is instructive and informative in terms of identifying what those areas are. In Baltimore, in the Baltimore report, which was just released this week, it talked about the indiscriminate stops of black people in Baltimore by Baltimore City police officers without probable cause. So I don't believe, and they use the word in the report about reform, I don't believe the Baltimore Police Department needs to be reformed. I believe it needs to be restructured because the system is broke and reform isn't going to straighten it up. So sometimes you need to throw the baby out with the bathwater. And the report suggests some of those very things. And so is reform enough? No, reform isn't enough. The other thing that these reports articulate is the issue about the other systemic government things that lend itself to the environment that happens in those communities that enable the police and support the police ability to be able to do those things to black and poor people. Because they don't happen to rich people.
Right.
They only happen to black and poor people.
Right.
So the diagram is there, the information is there. What we need to do is go in there and do it. And I don't care if it costs $10 million. Maryland has the mayor there has suggested that somehow or another it's going to be $3 to $10 million. Well, how much is a life worth?
Right.
Or are we going to continue to have this conversation? Because see, we're already over 300 people who have been shot and killed by police this year. And I'm willing to bet you that if you go into those police departments and look at it, Baton Rouge, even Dallas, one of the officers that was involved in Dallas, that was shot in Dallas, had a relationship with a white supremacist group.
Right.
But they didn't talk about that. We
Right.
didn't hear nothing about that, as if somehow or another that canceled out what had happened to the officers. No, it didn't
Well,
cancel it out, but it talks about the issue about these people being in our police department. So how can a white supremacist police a city where black people live and work and police around black people when he's a white supremacist?
Well, and that's a great question that we don't have the answer to, but we know that you have been pretty critical about your fellow officers, although you are a retired officer.
Right.
But yet we still, we have all these incidents happening, then followed by another town hall meeting and more discussions.
Right.
But what I want to know from you is, how do we get and when do we get to a place where we have officers that are still on the force,
Right.
that are willing to speak out on and against officers that they know are corrupt? And don't we need that to happen on a wide scale
Right.
across this country in order for that to be revamped?
Well, I believe that too, and so much so that I'm going to offer a suggestion. And I've talked to other people about it, people that I've been working with at Harvard and other things. I've even brought this up to the executive director of Noble. See, one of the things that I think black police, like myself, and organizations have a responsibility to encourage black police officers to speak out against what's going on. Now, how can we do that? There's a saying that they use in the police community that the vast majority of police officers that are doing the job are good police officers.
Yes.
So they suggest that maybe the less than 2% are bad police officers. So why would a vast majority of police officers stand around and allow 2% of the police officers? And believe me, as a police officer, I knew who the bad police officers
Of
were.
course.
And police officers know who they are too.
Of course.
Why would you stand around and allow 2 or 3 bad police officers to ruin and wreck the reputation of the other police officers in the police department without saying anything
So
about
answer
it?
that question. Why?
Because of the culture of policing.
That's right.
And police unions stand in
That's
the way
right.
of protecting police officers who speak out. Every time I spoke out against police brutality on the police department, there were people who came after me. And the individuals who came after me was those on the police department.
Yeah.
Because I broke the code of silence and I broke the culture. But I tell you one thing, you have to live with yourself. I didn't care about that. I didn't go there to be friends. I went there to be a job. And I went there to represent the very community that I came from, because if it wasn't for them, if it wasn't for the things that came out in the 68 Kerner Commission report, number one, that police department should represent those communities it served.
Yeah.
When I went on the police department, it was less than 20% black. I wasn't there by accident. I was there because I was needed, and what I was needed for was to represent my black people in the community that I served.
But Ron, again, you said you represented that 98% of so-called good cops, and
Right.
you stood up against the 2% bad.
Right.
Those other 98% didn't stand up to support you and stand with you?
Well, sometimes individuals did, but I also recognize that the strongest force that was in support of me was the community that I came from.
Wow.
Wow.
And
Not
so
inside.
I had-
Not inside the police
No,
department.
that wasn't inside the police department. There was a
Wow.
lady that worked here named Goldie Johnson.
Mm.
She was one of the strongest advocates for right in this city. Goldie is dead right now. She even had a husband on the police department that was a sergeant on the police department. And they used to get on him and go after him because his wife was an advocate. But I want to suggest to you or say to you, I think that exists in a lot of professions. That's why we don't see bad lawyers, good lawyers speak out against bad lawyers because of the
There's a
weight,
code.
the thing that goes
Sure.
on. But that shouldn't stop us, because
Right.
there are people like John Crump who going to speak out on, I don't
Yes.
care if you're bad, he's going to speak out against you.
Everybody. Yeah.
Well, let me just ask this last question. So, Ron, summarize all this for us,
Right.
maybe in 30, 60 seconds. How do we make it better? What do we do?
Doing the kind of things that we're doing. And today we're lucky because we have the Black Lives Matter movement, and they have put pen to pencil, mind to paper, and have articulated a strategy that we ought to be working on, and some of us are working on, along with people like John Crump and all. Because see, some of the solution to this is in the courtroom. But we need to know what those issues are. The Black Lives Matter just published a paper that talks about the police unions in this country,
Sure did.
and that nothing is going to happen if we don't deal with those police unions, because they're the ones who protect bad cops.
Gotcha.
They're the
Oh.
ones that protect the status quo in this country. So the answers is there. We just need to do it, and we are doing it.
Got it.
Well, thank you, Ron Hampton. You've just been hearing from Ron, retired DC police officer and chair of the Police Reform and Accountability Task Force.